He did not make a good point. He did not support himself well that video games should not be called an art form. Now, in 2006, he took part in a panel discussion entitled "An Epic Debate: Are Video Games an Art Form?" This was at the Conference on World Affairs. And there's another widely talked about quote that I will say now. One obvious difference between art and games is that you can win a game. It has rules, points, objectives, and an outcome. Santiago might cite an immersive game without points or rules, but I would say then it ceases to be a game and becomes a representation of a story, a novel, a play, dance, a film. Those are things you cannot win. You can only experience them. So in this quote, and in this panel, he's saying that things that have rules, points, objectives, and an outcome shouldn't be considered art. Now, I don't necessarily get where he's coming from there. That somehow, if it has rules, points, objectives, and an outcome, that all of a sudden is not art anymore. I can kind of see, like, with rules, he's saying that rules are limiting and constricting, and that art, that's going against what art is about. Art's about expression and representation of what you believe, and it's limitless. It doesn't have any rules. You can do whatever you want in art. And in games, they have restrictions, and that anything with restrictions cannot be art. That's all I can guess is what he's trying to say, is that things with restrictions cannot be art. And I can see his point, that art is about having no restrictions, about expressing yourself freely. But that doesn't mean I necessarily... I still don't agree with him about restrictions. I think that things can have restrictions. Sorry for pausing a lot, I'm just trying to think of what to say. Things can have restrictions, but still be considered art. One of the biggest things, in my opinion, about art is having a message. You're expressing yourself. You're saying what you believe in. And you normally have a message. The artist is going for something there. It's what art critics talk about a lot, is what is this person's message? What are they trying to show us? It's about expressing yourself, communicating what's in your mind. And I still think that even with restrictions in a video games can still have powerful messages, even with restrictions. But I can see where he's coming from the restrictions point. But I'm going to focus more on the second half of this quote. This is very interesting to me. He says that an immersive game without rules, points, restrictions, objectives cease to be a game and becomes a representation of a story, novel, play, dance, or film. So he says if it doesn't have restrictions and it's immersive and it doesn't have points and objectives, then it's not a game anymore. At that point, it's a representation of a story. Now that's very interesting. I haven't heard a lot of people view it like that and talk about it like that. So I'm very willing to debate about that part of the quote. I'm very interested in his position there. Once again, I don't agree with what he's saying, that it ceases to be a game when there's no rules, restrictions, points, or objectives. He's saying that a game pretty much has to have those, and if it doesn't, it's not a game. It's a representation of a story. Well, sorry, I'm just trying to find a way to phrase my words so they actually make sense. I have problems with that sometimes. If a game does not have rules, objectives, restrictions, points, and the stuff that he's saying makes a game, I argue it's still a game. That does not change it. A game is something that you can interact with. That is the most important part of a game. That is the defining feature of games, is that they are an interactive experience. You are interacting with the game in some way. If you interact with it, it's a game. If you interact with it and it changes something, it's a game. For instance, a painting on a wall in a museum that's hundreds of years old. You can't interact with that. Meaning, you can't go into the artwork, the painting, because this isn't Harry Potter. You can't go into the painting and change it. You can't interact with what's happening in real time. I mean, you can paint over it, blah blah, you can rip it, tear it, whatever. And you're interacting with it. But it's not the same, if you get what I'm saying. Games. Any game, you interact with it. Say, for instance, Doom. Because Doom is a game... The first quote was centered around Doom, in a way, because at that time the Doom movie, which is a terrible movie, was talked a lot about, and he was talking about the Doom movie, and he was comparing, like, you know, movies and films and other forms of art to video games. So I'm going to run with the Doom game and say that you interact with Doom. For instance, when you press W, the W key on your keyboard, you will move forward in Doom. If you press the left mouse button, you will shoot. You are interacting in real time with this game, and changing what's happening in the game, and every person who does this is interacting with it in a different way. It's astronomically low odds that you can do the exact same thing as someone else who played Doom. You're going to do something differently, most likely. There's a tiny, 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 tiny chance that you could do it the exact same, but really you would need like a robot to do it, to keep the pressure of how much pressure you apply to the keys and how long you shoot. You would need all of that data to be interpreted by a robot and to replicate it exactly. But that's not my point. You know, off on another tangent about robots playing Doom, which would be awesome, right? Everyone wants to see a robot play Doom. Games are interactive experiences. It doesn't matter if there are points, rules, objectives, and restrictions. That is not the defining factor of a game. The defining factor of a game is interactivity. That's what makes a game a game. So anything at all that's interactive is a game. So he's saying what Roger is saying is that if it doesn't have the points or the rules and the restrictions, that it's a representation of a story, and those you cannot win, you can only experience them. So he's saying those are art. Well, if he's saying those games that he doesn't consider to be games are art, and I'm saying that all games that have interactivity are games, if you combine our viewpoints together, video games are art. Some video games are art. Now, I will agree, not all video games are art. There are some that don't have messages, don't have purposes, don't really have that much of a story, don't look beautiful. There are games that are like that would not really be considered art, and I can agree with that. Not all games should be considered art, but there are tons of games that should. that people have spent a lot of creativity, a lot of time creating, and after all that time creating, they should be able to say that they were respected enough in the art community to be considered a form of art. They should be able to say that and be proud that they have created something that is considered art and that's respected and acclaimed. They deserve it. So we, as people in the gaming community, and if you are in the art community, or any community for that matter, we should respect these people, these developers, who develop amazing pieces of art that are amazing. So, that is all I have to say on this issue. If you agree, disagree, have any comments, please tell me. Any constructive criticism is also appreciated. Anything that you want to submit into this debate, just leave it in the comment section below, and I will read every single comment. So thank you for listening, and have a nice day.